For 40 years, the food pyramid told Americans to build their diet on a foundation of grains. Bread, pasta, cereal, 6 to 11 servings a day. Fat was the enemy. Butter was dangerous. Eggs were suspect. In 2026, the United States government turned that pyramid upside down. Proteins and healthy fats now sit at the top. Grains have been moved toward the bottom. And for the first time in federal history, the guidelines state that no amount of added sugar is recommended for a health-promoting diet. The reaction was immediate and divided. Health associations raised alarms. Online, millions celebrated. Scientists who had been warning about sugar for decades said it was long overdue. Others called it a dangerous step backward. But beneath the debate about fats and carbohydrates lies a deeper question, one that affects every family in America. When the government issues dietary guidelines, those recommendations ripple outward. They shape school lunch programs. They influence hospital menus. They appear on food packaging and in doctors' offices. For millions of Americans, these guidelines become the default understanding of what healthy eating means. So what happens when that guidance changes fundamentally? And how much weight should any single source, even the federal government, carry when you're deciding what to put on your family's table? To answer that, we need to understand how we got here. AccessRealFood.gov. Scroll down. A black screen will appear with the phrase, "America is sick." Keep scrolling down. The numbers you'll find will tell a sobering story. 50% of Americans have prediabetes or diabetes. 75% of adults report having at least one chronic condition. 90% of U.S. healthcare spending goes to treating chronic disease, much of which is linked to diet and lifestyle. A haunting view of Americans' health. But are these numbers real? The American Institute for Cancer Research published a study that shows that about 1 of every 2 American adults has or is at risk of having diabetes, with approximately a third of those with diabetes unaware they have it. Now, the Center for Disease Control reports that 3 in 4 American adults have at least one chronic condition, and over half have 2 or more chronic conditions. Among midlife adults ages 35 to 64, more than 75% have at least one condition. Among younger adults ages 18 to 34, 60% have at least one condition. The Department of Agriculture also reports, based on CDC numbers, that 90% of U.S. healthcare spending does go to chronic disease treatment. More data from the Center for Disease Control confirmed that in 2023, adult obesity in the U.S. has reached 40.3%. Furthermore, the prevalence of severe obesity is nearing 10%. According to the New England Journal of Medicine, the current trajectory suggests that by 2030, nearly 1 in 4 American adults will suffer severe obesity. This decline occurred despite decades of public adherence to a grain-based dietary foundation. Critical to the new guidelines is the portion distortion phenomenon. Research published via the National Institutes of Health reveals that standard marketplace servings have decoupled from nutritional reality. A typical chocolate chip cookie is now 700% larger than the USDA standard. Similarly, the Journal of Consumer Research notes that average portions of cooked pasta now exceed federal standards by 480%. To better understand the 2026 reversal, we must go to the past and understand what is being reversed. See these letters? Do you know what they mean? S.A.D. stands for Standard American Diet, and it is the way most Westerners eat. Grain, ultra-processed foods, seed oils, added sugar, saturated fats. The Standard American Diet did not emerge out of the blue. To understand the whole story, you have to focus on 2 elements, the S.A.D. itself and a name, Ancel Keys. The S.A.D. was a product of the mid-20th century. Following World War II, the primary goal was to prevent malnutrition and ensure a reliable food supply for a growing population. Fast forward, in 1977, the dietary goals for the United States were published, forming the precursor to the 1992 food pyramid. This framework formalized the S.A.D, a diet characterized by high intakes of processed grains, refined sugars, and seed oils, while strictly limiting animal fats and red meat. Yet, one of the most persistent myths of the 20th century is that the scientific community was in total agreement regarding the low-fat model. On one side was Dr. Ancel Keys. Ancel Keys popularized what became known as the diet heart hypothesis, the theory that saturated fat was the primary driver of cardiovascular disease. On the other side, Dr. Yudkin's research pointed to sugar as the primary driver of heart disease and obesity. He famously called it pure, white, and deadly. And Dr. George Mann described the focus on dietary cholesterol as the greatest scientific deception of our times. But simultaneously, something else was happening behind the scenes. Yudkin and Mann's research hadn't lost the scientific argument. They had lost the political and financial race. Independent studies have since revealed that Keys selected data non-randomly to support his conclusions. An archival investigation published in JAMA Internal Medicine revealed that internal documents uncovered by researcher Kristen Kearns showed that the review was actually Project 226, initiated and secretly funded by the Sugar Research Foundation, SRF. The SRF had paid the Harvard team $6,500, roughly $50,000 in today's currency, to conduct a review with a specific goal: to refute the growing evidence that sugar was linked to heart disease. John Hickson, a top sugar industry executive, helped set the review's objectives and even supplied the papers he wanted included. The public believed they were looking at an independent expert assessment. They weren't. Yudkin and Mann's research appeared to have vanished in the dark until modern investigative work by journalists such as Gary Taubes and Nina Teicholz brought these criticisms back into the mainstream.
Butter, meat, and cheese do not cause heart disease. That fat doesn't make you fat. If you eat just too many carbohydrates, period, you're more likely to get diabetes and heart disease and become obese.
Teicholz's research highlighted how the original 1992 pyramid was shaped by a complex web of industry lobbying and political negotiation. The 2026 guidelines represent the most significant shift in federal nutrition policy in nearly 50 years. Under the banner of Eat Real Food, the new framework moves proteins and healthy fats to the top of the pyramid. Beef, poultry, fish, eggs, butter, olive oil are now prioritized. Vegetables remain emphasized. Fruits are included in moderation. Grains have moved down, with the distinction drawn between whole grains and refined carbohydrates. But the most striking change involves sugar. Previous guidelines recommended limiting added sugar to 10% of daily calories. The 2026 guidelines go further, stating that no amount of added sugar is recommended for a health-promoting diet. This effectively reclassifies sugar from a discretionary indulgence to something with no recognized nutritional benefit. The scientific reasoning behind these changes centers on what researchers call the carbohydrate insulin model. The traditional view treated the body like a furnace. Calories in, calories out. All fuel was essentially equal. Weight management was a matter of simple arithmetic. The new model treats the body more like a chemical plant, regulated by hormones, particularly insulin. Under this view, different foods trigger different metabolic responses. 100 calories of steak and 100 calories of bread are not biochemically equivalent. Think of insulin as a master key. When it's elevated in your bloodstream, it locks your fat cells shut. Your body stores energy rather than burning it. High carbohydrate intake, even from complex sources like whole grains, can keep insulin chronically elevated. By centering the diet on proteins and fats, the new guidelines aim to keep insulin lower, allowing the body to access its own stored energy more readily. In simpler terms, the government has shifted from telling Americans to eat less to telling them to eat differently. This shift has divided the scientific and medical community. Critics of the new guidelines raise legitimate concerns. Christopher Gardner, a nutrition researcher at Stanford, expressed disappointment to NPR. "I'm very disappointed in the new pyramid that features red meat and saturated fat sources at the very top, as if that's something to prioritize. It does go against decades and decades of evidence and research." The Center for Science and the Public Interest issued a statement calling the guidance on protein and fats at best confusing, and at worst harmful. They noted that while the meat and dairy industries may welcome the changes, the American public should approach them with caution. These aren't fringe voices. They represent a substantial body of researchers with great reputations. Supporters of the new guidelines counter with their own evidence. The American Medical Association praised the guidelines for spotlighting the highly processed foods and excess sodium that fuel heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and other chronic illnesses. The International Dairy Foods Association welcomed the emphasis on whole foods and the departure from the low-fat orthodoxy that had discouraged consumption of full-fat dairy products. Stanford neuroscientist Andrew Huberman, whose podcast reaches millions, commented that the new pyramid looks spot on, assuming people maintain reasonable calorie intake and stay physically active. These supporters argue that the guidelines reflect updated evidence about protein needs, blood sugar regulation, and the health risks of ultra-processed foods. They point to the obesity and diabetes epidemics as evidence that the previous approach wasn't working. So where does this leave us? Every meal is a decision. What you buy at the grocery store, what you prepare for your children, what you put on your own plate. These choices belong to you. Guidelines can inform them, research can shape them, but ultimately, the table is yours. The 2026 pyramid offers one framework. History suggests holding it loosely, staying curious, staying informed, and remembering that the experts have been wrong before. Not because expertise doesn't matter. It does. But because the final authority over what your family eats isn't in Washington. It's in your kitchen. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel and share it with your friends. Every week we release a new video analysis about an interesting topic. Our last videos were about Maduro's extraction and the protests in Iran. You can find it on Big Picture Originals channel. And if you like content like this, we invite you to go deep at our investigation about the censorship industrial complex that threatens free speech in America. Scan the QR code or click the link in the description and register to get a free ebook about America's censorship machine. Thank you, and see you soon.